After the huge strain put on the band after recording The Colour and the Shape and then instantly going out to tour, it made sense for the band's next release to be a much more relaxed album. Now operating as a three-piece, Foo Fighters recorded the album without any label interference. The band co-produced the album with Adam Casper, who would later produce albums for Queens of the Stone Age and Pearl Jam. Instead of treating recording like work, they were much more relaxed about it. In fact, the band even cooked a barbecue every day. Dave Grohl described the process as just eating chili, drinking beer and whiskey and recording whenever we felt like it. The band decided to make the album sound as good as possible without using computer programs such as Pro Tools or Auto-Tune to alter their performances. The album was released November 2nd, 1999 and was named There Is Nothing Left to Lose. The album carried on a lot of the sounds that the band explored on The Colour and the Shape, mainly the radio-ready aggressive rock songs, but also expanded more into softer and more stripped-back songs. There was a larger focus on melody than the screaming and shouting on previous albums, minus of course songs like Stacked Actors and Breakout. Many fans loved the album and it even earned the band the first of their to-date 4 Grammy Awards. However, others didn't like the new direction that the band took and wished that they would go back to the aggression of the previous 2 albums. My opinion? Well, let's go track by track and find out. This is There's Nothing Left to Lose. The first track on the album is Stacked Actors, the heaviest track on the album. Although I do think this track isn't the best representation of the rest of the album, it definitely is a great way to start it off. It starts with a huge explosion of noise with the heavily distorted down-tuned guitar riff at the beginning. The verses have a reverb heavy clean guitar, which is definitely more representative of the album. The track is the most abrasive and most in-your-face track on the album. I like how it has the heaviness of some of the tracks in the last 2 albums such as Weenie Beanie and Enough Space, but has a lot more melody to it. There isn't much screaming in the track at all. The riffs on the track are super catchy and memorable, and I love the clean guitar in the verse. It's incredibly atmospheric and adds a weird moody quality to the track. The track is about Dave's hatred towards celebrity culture and people from Hollywood. Definitely a very welcome theme since it seems most rock bands nowadays are singing about how much they love LA. He sings about how everyone in Hollywood is incredibly fake and care more about their appearances than their personalities. He shows a strong hatred towards actors especially, saying that they have nothing better to do than to pretend to be someone else. His hatred and anger towards Hollywood is shown all throughout the track. The track is a huge explosion of aggression and definitely one of my favourite opening tracks that the band have ever done. Breakout is one of the band's most memorable and iconic single tracks. It has the loud distorted guitars from some of the singles from The Colour and the Shape, but it is much more laid back, something that the whole album definitely is. The production definitely sounds much more basic than on their previous album on this track. There aren't loads of guitar parts on this track, which is appropriate seeing as Dave was actually the only guitarist in the band at the point of this album. The riffs in this track are fantastic, from the phaser-covered intro to the very punky bridge that reminds me of riffs such as Enough Space. The track is in many ways a simple love song, but it definitely has a humorous quality to it. In fact, it actually did start off as a joke song. The track is about a relationship making the guy feel so stressed out that he ends up having really bad acne because of her. He's afraid that the girl will break up with him because of his acne. Yeah, lyrically it's such a stupid song, but it's not supposed to be serious, and I think that humour makes the song a lot more fun. This is just an all-around upbeat track with some super catchy melodies, a fantastic chorus and great guitar riffs. Definitely one of my all-time favourite Foo Fighters songs. Learn to Fly, another one of the band's most recognisable songs. This track is much more laid back and moderately paced than Breakout. In fact, I feel like this track pretty much encapsulates the album as a whole. The track isn't super aggressive or angry, it's catchy and fun. Dave double-tracked his vocals and it gives a really atmospheric larger sound. In fact, as unaggressive as this track is, it does sound huge. It definitely has the arena rock sound that the band would be known for. The track is about searching for inspiration and looking for signs of life to make him feel alive. The first verse is about the pain Dave is feeling and how he is struggling to get over it. In some ways, the track is about Dave saying farewell to the darkness of the rockstar lifestyle that he's been living. He looks for something to take him away from all that and basically save him. Lyrically, it's definitely a pretty strong song. I can definitely see why it's so big, although I do think it's one of the few Foo Fighters songs that I feel like got too much attention. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is a really good song. I just think it was a little overplayed, and because of that, I don't find myself returning to it much. It's kind of been played out to me. In fact, Dave has even said it's one of his least favourites on the album. But still, it's a lot of fun and definitely a damn good track. Gimme Stitches is where the album really finds itself. The first 3 tracks seemed in many ways to be the safe tracks that they had to release in order to hook fans of the previous album. This is the track where things really start to change, and for the rest of the album it stays with the slow reacts and heavily melodic sound that's in this track. The track has a pretty good riff that starts it off. The rest of the instrumentation isn't anything really standout or in your face. For me, what really keeps the song interesting is the melody to it. It's really catchy, my favourite melody in the track actually being from the bridge and the backing vocals that are sung in the final chorus. This track definitely has an atmospheric and calm sound to it. It's very welcoming, not aggressive and not too boring. It's not the most engaging track on the album, but it's definitely a pretty good one. The track is about a dysfunctional relationship in which the two people enjoy hurting each other and driving each other away, but in some ways the guy wants to escape and save himself. Nothing special, nothing that completely blows me away, but it's still a pretty damn solid track. Generator is one of my favourite tracks on the album. The talk box on the guitar sounds fantastic and shows the heavy influence from rock bands from the 70s that this album definitely embraces quite a lot. The track is dark but at the same time incredibly catchy and fun. The instrumentation is fantastic. There's the punk-inspired guitar work during the track mixed in with the talk box lead, plus a fantastic bass line throughout the track, especially during the chorus. Nate Mendel is fantastic on this track, and actually the album as a whole. I think this album has some of the best bass work from him on any of the band's albums. The track is about the sacrifices made for love, even though in the situation of the song they aren't worth it. Dave sings about pushing to keep the relationship going even though she's starting to lose interest. He also sings about how he embraces the pain he feels when he's with her because he just wants to be with her. In some ways it's a kind of dark song about being fucked over but being too in love to notice or really care. It shows the blindness and ignorance that love can cause. In fact, he even references suicide as a possibility of what he will have to do for her. This mixed in with the softness of the track definitely gives it a melancholy sound that is absolutely beautiful. Easily one of the highlights of the album for me, definitely one of my all-time favourite Foo Fighters songs. When you ask die-hard Foo Fighters fans what their favourite non-single track is, I guarantee most of them will say Aurora. And there is a pretty good reason for that, because this track is fucking fantastic. The track is a nostalgic look back on the life in Seattle that Dave used to live. The song goes on to question the meaning of life and is in some ways one of the most philosophically deep tracks a band have ever written. The instrumentation on the song is really what makes it stand out above most of the rest of the album. The track starts with a beautiful delay-covered guitar riff, which also plays throughout the verses. There's also Nate playing a fantastic bass line, which is simple but yet really drives the track. The lyrics are beautiful and really fit in with the sound of the track. It holds a very positive message of moving on and finding something new even when it feels like the good times are over. As Dave reminisces about his time in Seattle, the good times and the dark times, he feels the desire to find somewhere new to call home. The track is very clean and beautiful, but it has a pretty mystical quality to it, mainly because of the huge amount of atmosphere in the track. The track really does sound gigantic and it just builds up and gets larger and larger as it progresses. Then after the last chorus, the track builds up and explodes into this gigantic, distorted, effect-heavy riff that gave me goosebumps when I first heard it. And even now it completely blows me away. It's one of the most emotionally powerful tracks on the album. I completely understand why it's a fan favourite and why it's still a staple of their live set to this day. Live-In Skin is my least favourite track on the album. Although catchy and with a decent riff, it feels so rushed and underdeveloped. In fact, it was written and recorded quickly while the album was being mixed. It's by no means bad, I do enjoy it, and there are a few really killer moments in the track, especially the bridge. Honestly, the bridge is what keeps this track really from being too bad. It's simple and may seem a little repetitive, but I don't know, I love it. It's really catchy, and even though before listening to the track again for this review I couldn't really remember how the song went, I did have that bridge in the back of my head somewhere. The track is about how the band have changed and where they are now, how they've changed and won't change back to how they used to be. Kind of ironic, seeing as though Wasting Light pretty much did change the band back to their old sound. This track is by no means bad, in fact it's still a lot better than some of the filler tracks on the next couple of albums, but I just feel it's the least interesting track on the album. Next Year is one of the prettiest and most upbeat tracks on this album, and maybe of the band's entire career. It doesn't get aggressive at all, it's just a bouncy, happy little clean track. It has the sound of a poppy 90s alternative rock / college rock track, like the catchy sound of bands like Third Eye Blind. It has a simple riff and a beautiful melody. The track is about an Air Force pilot singing to the one he loves and saying that he'll be home next year. It's really pretty and beautiful. However, I have one problem with it, is that it goes on way too long. The final chorus is incredibly repetitive and literally the track ends but then comes back in to go through the chorus once again. That part could have easily been cut out, it doesn't really add anything. Overall, it's a pretty good track. It doesn't blow me away or anything, but it's still pretty good. Headwise is in my opinion one of the most underrated tracks on the album. The verses have this very bright and pretty, almost new wave sound to it. In fact, the track is heavily inspired by the Rolling Stones album Tattoo You, and listening to a couple of tracks from that album I can definitely see the influence in it, especially in the pretty sound in the verses. The chorus is very loud and fuzz covered. Similar to the rest of the album, this track has some fantastic melodies. It's incredibly catchy and I personally found it to be one of the catchiest tracks on the album. It has a fantastic riff, similar to many of the other riffs, being a riff played without distortion but covered in effects. There isn't much online about what this track is about, only theories. For me, the most possible is it being about using drugs to create an artificial happiness. Wirehead is a term in science fiction originally used by writer Larry Niven as a person fitted with a brain implant which would stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain. So I guess that link is definitely possible and would make the track a lot more interesting. I definitely think this is one of the tracks that people should pay more attention to. In fact, I feel this album as a whole has some of the band's most underrated songs, the next one definitely being the most underrated on this album for me. Ain't It the Life is fucking beautiful. This is the softest track on the album, showing much more of the 70s soft rock influence. Dave has described this track as being the product of listening to loads of Fleetwood Mac and has even said it sounds kind of like the Eagles. And yeah, I definitely get that when listening to the track. The track is about the quiet and peaceful life that Dave lived in Virginia, and it definitely has a southern rock sound to the track. That really is what makes it stand out. It really sounds completely different to anything else on the album and really anything the band did beforehand. It's a soft, peaceful and mellow track. It's one that when I want to listen to something calm to chill out to, I will put on. Definitely one of my favourite tracks from the album and definitely the most underrated one in my opinion. MIA is another incredibly underrated track. Like, it's one that I've never actually heard anyone talk about, which I personally don't understand because I thought it was a pretty damn good track and definitely a great closing track. It's an incredibly anthemic and large song. The track is about saying farewell to Los Angeles, and it definitely is a fantastic way to end the album with one final large goodbye. The track starts off pretty soft but builds up and gets louder and more aggressive as it progresses until the end of the track, which is a gigantic blast of aggression and energy. The progression in this track is fantastic and I adore the build up in the bridge. Although there isn't loads to talk about with this track, and I definitely think it's the weakest ending track out of the 3 albums we've looked at so far, it's still a pretty good song and one that I think deserves people talking about more. There Is Nothing Left to Lose was and still is to this day an album that splits people. A lot of fans love it and consider it to be one of, if not the best album the band have ever done. However, others consider it to be the point where the band lost their touch. But I'm definitely on the former of those. This is a great album. Lyrically it's super strong and shows Dave Grohl can write good songs when he really puts his mind to it. The laid back and calm nature to the recording process really shows through on these tracks. It's just a much calmer album than anything we'd seen from the band prior. The album is beautiful and has a much larger emphasis on melodies than aggression. However, I do think there is a bit of a lack of really memorable and solid guitarists on the album, and although the stripped back sound of the album does work in its favour a lot of the time, I do miss the huge mix of different guitar parts on the album. But overall, this is a really solid album showing heavy influence from soft rock bands from the late 70s and early 80s, while also keeping the catchy grunge sound from the band. Also, once again, this album has a fantastic bonus track / B-side with the track Fraternity. Honestly, this track is one of my favourite Foo Fighters songs ever, and it's a shame that it's not on the album. There Is Nothing Left to Lose is personally, along with The Colour and the Shape, among my favourite Foo Fighters albums, and because of that, it gets a much deserved 10 out of 10. After the album was released, the band realised that they really did need to have 2 guitarists for the band, and so they restarted their search for a new guitarist. After auditioning multiple guitarists, they settled with Chris Shiflett from the band's No Use for a Name and Me First in the Gimme Gimmes. In 2001, the band started to work on their next album. However, after spending 4 months in the studio, they realised that the songs just didn't sound right. The sessions cost over $1 million, but yet they still weren't satisfied. These sessions were actually released online recently under the name of the $1 Million Demos. The band were completely lacking enthusiasm, and it almost drove them to breaking up entirely. The band stepped away from the album and decided to work on other things. Dave joined Queens of the Stone Age and played drums on their fantastic album Songs for the Deaf and toured with them in 2002. All of the members of the band started to work on new band / musical projects instead. In 2002, the band got together for a scheduled performance at Coachella. Dave decided that it would most likely be the final time the band performed together. However, after enjoying the performance so much, the band decided to get back and start to work on the album again. Most of the first sessions were scrapped, minus the song Tired of You. However, all the other songs were re-recorded and new songs were written too. And finally, on October 22nd, 2002, the album One by One was released.